So thank you very much, dear participants and dear colleagues, for joining today's webinar, and welcome to today's UNIDO-WAIPA webinar on the findings from the UNIDO-WAIPA survey of ACP IPAs. The purpose of today's webinar, as outlined in the webinar brochure, is to present the survey results as well as the insights emanating from its analysis to a broad audience. This webinar will also give an overview of state of play, challenges and opportunities of investment promotion and facilitation in ACP countries. The survey was a first of its kind and an important part of the partnership between WAIPA and UNIDO. But before I hand over the word to WAIPA Deputy Executive Director, Mr. Dushyant Thakur, I would like to give a short overview of the timetable for today's session. After the opening remarks of WAIPA and UNIDO, we will have a number of presentations and insights on the survey, as well as on the key recommendations of the survey. And subsequently, we have time for Q&A. You can place questions in the chat box throughout the webinar that will be then addressed at the end accordingly. Perhaps you can also allow people to ask the questions if it's technically possible. It would be important to either way to mention your name and the agency you're working with, and then to post the question. This will be very helpful in addressing the questions then later on. But without further ado, I would like to hand over the word to Dushyant Thakur for his opening remarks on behalf of WAIPA.
So much, Andreas. I would just like to begin by first thanking UNIDO for this very special long-standing relation and partnership that we've had. Unlike a lot of other partnerships, this one is very output-oriented. And, the event today further, focuses on the ongoing work which has been happening in the ACP countries. So a couple of key milestones: the Invest in ACP portal was launched at the 26th World Investment Conference in Geneva in September 2022. We've had the launch of the report and a workshop again at the 27th World Investment Conference in Delhi recently. There have been very few studies on the status of investment promotion and the trends in ACP region. And this is what makes this report, very special. Now, I'm just going to put on my IPA practitioner hat for the next 3 minutes and bring out, 5 key points, which also relate fairly well to the report. First, what the report talks about is that the ACP IPAs have a large number of mandates. Now, I know from experience that if there is an adequate and well-trained staff, the whole collaboration thing can work really, really well. But two specific mandates, I believe, which are going to be game changers. First is, the first point, which is basically startup and innovation mandate. We understand that 90% of ACP IPAs have this mandate. And clearly, we all know where the future lies. The future of Africa is in startups, is in innovation, and so goes for both Pacific as well as the Caribbean leaders. So really nurture this mandate if your IPA has it. That would be my first point. Moving on to the second point, let's talk a little bit about the UN SDGs, And while IPAs are already ensuring that the investments which are coming in, the targeting they're doing, the facilitation that they're doing, it's all aligned with the SDG framework. We believe that IPAs can play a much bigger role in helping the countries meet the SDG vision. And one of the key solutions there lies in creating bankable projects. And, from the survey, we understood that, 88% of IPAs in the ACP region have the PPP mandate. So clearly, that's where something which can really help you get a lot of investments. Also, I know Stefan and the team has been working a lot on the Invest in ACP portal. It's already got more than 900 projects. So I think the bankability is the most important thing. And there are clear opportunities when we look at the Global Gateway Initiative, the China's Belt and Road Initiative. And that's something which I believe, even as an IPA, we're not the ones who are specifically creating projects. Let's sort of be really in the center of all that action. work closely with all the other agencies, but ensure that this list of projects which comes out is really something where, the sovereign funds, the pensions, and all of those guys are putting up a lot of money. Very interestingly, I just came across Kenya's strategy. They've come out with a strategy plan 2023 to 2027, something which they've done recently. And it was interesting to see that, they have taken a target of creating 50 bankable investment opportunity reports each year for the next 5 years, which I believe is again very interesting. But that brings me to the third point, which is the whole point around IPA strategy. We all understand that getting investments, grounding of those investments is not the easiest task. And that's where your IPA strategy becomes very, very critical. Need not be a public document, but it is very critical that a lot of things are already pre-planned, KPIs are set, everything is done. My fourth point, again, this is again a huge debate. How much depth as far as sectors is concerned should an IPA have? One point which is very clear, when we've done it, that slowly the work is moving really from a sector level to a subsector level, maybe even to a subsector level. And that's something which becomes really important. Even there is, a lot of talk around events, and we saw that there is less focus on sectoral events, but if there is good preparation which is done beforehand, if one-on-one meetings can be lined up, then sectoral events actually can also really lead to some good investments coming your way. Uh, Again, should we have all of this sectoral depth? Really, it really goes down to how much are the limitations, how much bandwidth. But if there is limitations where you can't get a lot of these, sectoral depth, work with the other departments. That's another key point which I would. Uh, my last and fifth point is again on digitization. I'm sure through the webinar there's going to be a lot of talk around it. It's very clear that the future of investment promotion is digital. And I know that a number of ACP countries are still in the process of coming out with their, the whole digitization strategies. But I personally spent a lot of time around digital single window systems. And if you do the entire life cycle really well, including things such as, incentive, site selection, it can really, really help you. Social media, again, it may not be very easy for each investor to be always there. So try and leverage it to the extent. There were a few other points related to aftercare and ensuring that, any work that we are doing, the world knows about it. Bringing out, so specifically, I did want to turn attention to chapter 5.2, which is on environmental objectives, which I think you would all find very useful. My last point, the 5 key recommendations which come out, and there's going to be a lot of depth in the webinar today on it, which is on governance, prioritizing digitization, better targeting, unlocking the FDI potential, and more alignment with the UN SDGs. You will all find this really, really useful. I'll just stop here, but I really hope that you all find this webinar really useful. Back to you, Andreas. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Dushyant, for your opening remarks. And now I would like to invite Mr. Michael Detlefsen. He's the Chief of the Division of Innovative Finance and International Financial Institutions at UNIDO for his opening remarks. Please, Michael, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Andreas. Dear esteemed colleagues from WAIPA, dear speakers, dear participants, on behalf of UNIDO, I would like to welcome you to our webinar on the recently launched UNIDO-WAIPA report on investment promotion and facilitation in African, Caribbean, and the Pacific countries. I'm delighted to see such a distinguished group of professionals gathered here today, representing a diverse range of expertise and perspectives in the field of investment promotion and facilitation. Let me first express my sincere gratitude to the World Association of Investment Promotion Agencies, our co-hosts of this webinar, and a special thanks to Mr. Ismail Azahin and Mr. Dushyant Thakur for being the key drivers behind the long-standing partnership between WAIPA and UNIDO, a cooperation that is the foundation behind the publication that will be presented today. We all know that investments can have a transformative and catalyzing effect on creating jobs, expanding access to sustainable energy, and cultivating shared prosperity, particularly in the Global South and the ACP region, where nearly 80% of least developed countries are located. However, despite its potential, FDI flows have not been evenly distributed. Although foreign direct investment flows to developing countries grew by 4% in 2022, considerable disparities continue to persist, with ACP countries facing challenges in attracting sufficient investment. Investment promotion agencies play a central role in channeling investments into their home countries. Through the ACP Business Friendly Program, funded by the European Union and the Organization of African, Pacific and Caribbean States, UNIDO aims to strengthen the capacities of IPAs to empower them to foster more robust and equitable investment flows for sustainable development in their respective countries. However, to gain a deeper understanding of the existing strengths and needs of these IPAs in the ACP region and to better support them, WAIPA and UNIDO joined forces to conduct a first-of-its-kind survey. The results of the survey, compiled in a comprehensive publication, were launched during WAIPA's 27th World Investment Conference in India last year. Today, we are happy to present these insights to an even broader audience and provide an overview of the challenges and opportunities facing investment promotion and facilitation in ACP countries. Furthermore, key recommendations and practical tools to enhance IPA effectiveness and align efforts with the Sustainable Development Goals will be presented. Moreover, I am delighted that Mr. Carl Sauvant is joining us here today from the Columbia Center on Sustainable Investment to broaden our knowledge of the nexus between the findings of this report and the recently concluded negotiations of the WTO's Investment Facilitation for Development Agreement. Before I hand over to today's speakers, let me also thank the 61 participating IPAs, some of which might be here in the call today, for contributing their time and efforts to this important exercise. In conclusion, thank you very much, and I look forward to an engaging and insightful webinar. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Michael, for your opening remarks. I'd like to now hand over to Ms. Annika Bachhofer for setting the scene, presentation on the survey and its main findings. Annika is a project associate, Sustainability Standards and Responsible Business Unit at the Department of SDG Innovation and Economic Transformation at UNIDO. Please, Annika, forward to your presentation.
Yeah, thank you very much, Andreas. We will now dive into the topic of today's webinar, so the insights of the UNIDO-WAIPA report on investment promotion agencies in the ACP region. And to set the scene, I will start by giving a brief overview of the survey and its main findings, which then allows my colleagues to elaborate on the framework and recommendations that were developed based on these findings. So as briefly mentioned before, the survey was conducted as part of the ACP Business Friendly Program, through which UNIDO aims to strengthen the capacities of IPAs in the ACP region. And this empirical data collection exercise was aimed at gaining a better understanding of the characteristics of ACP IPAs, their emergent strategies and technical assistance needs. The joint survey was conducted in the months of July and August of 2022, and 61 IPAs from 39 countries participated, which presents an overall response rate of 41%. 93% of respondents were IPA managers, directors, CEOs, or board members, and on average, they have worked for over 7 years at the IPA and bring almost 11 years of experience in the FDI industry. And the seniority and the level of experience of the respondents not only lend credibility, but also robustness to the results of the survey. So in terms of geographical coverage, the large majority of the 61 IPAs are based in Africa. 16% are from the Caribbean and 7% from the Pacific. Around 1/3 of the covered IPAs are from least developed countries. Of the total, 62% of the respondents are national IPAs, but we have also received responses from sub-national IPAs, as well as from other investment promotion intermediaries, such as private sector associations or SME development agencies. When looking at the size of IPAs in terms of the number of full-time employees, the average participating IPA has 85 employees, while the median is at 42. And this shows that the majority, so 52% of IPAs, are rather small in terms of staff size. Another element to be mentioned is the IPA's years of existence. So of the 61 responding institutions, 38 were established more than 20 years ago, while 13% were only created less than 5 years ago. So what did the survey actually unearth? First of all, some very interesting findings were linked to ACP IPA's mandates. The results of the survey showed that ACP IPAs have 9.2 mandates on average, with the most common being foreign and domestic investment promotion, investment climate reform, startup and innovation, as well as public-private partnerships. Moreover, ACP IPAs stated that they cover mandates such as export promotion, incentive administration, international investment agreement negotiation, and industrial park administration. And when comparing these results to IPAs from OECD countries, we found that OECD IPAs are commonly more specialized, with only 5.7 mandates on average. Here it is also very interesting to see the high importance that ACP IPAs place on domestic investment promotion, including outward FDI, and this figure is significantly higher than the findings of the OECD 2018 mapping of OECD IPAs. Another important part of the survey focused on budget allocation. So participating IPAs were asked what percentage of their total budget was allocated to different FDI-related functions. And as can be seen on the slide, investor targeting attracted 16% of budget, facilitation and image building each 13%. Then there's training, ICT, and the combination of research and advocacy. The remaining 19% is classified as other, which might be due to the multiplicity of mandates. And what is interesting here is that ACP IPAs allocate significantly fewer resources to FDI-specific business-generating and client-facing functions when compared to OECD IPAs. So we see that they allocate around 42% versus 75%, which is allocated in OECD countries to these activities. So as we know, IPAs across the world carefully select which countries and sectors to target, focusing on those that best match their competitive advantages. In the case of ACP IPAs, the survey results show the importance of China and the US as target countries. In Africa, for instance, only China was named as a priority target by more than 50% of the IPAs. Other countries that are major targets are the US, the UK, and India. And mentioned to a lesser extent were also Western European countries such as Germany, but also Turkey or the UAE. In the Caribbean, North America is a key target for all 10 Caribbean IPAs. And apart from China, the other major focus was the UK, as well as other countries in the Caribbean. And in the Pacific, all responding IPAs included China, Australia, and New Zealand among their top 5 targets. Fiji and Indonesia were also mentioned, underlining a more regional focus in their targeting efforts. But overall, the survey results highlight that intra-ACP targeting is still very low, and this is especially true for intra-African targeting. When looking at the key sectors, 3 of the top 4 sectors were the same across all 3 ACP regions. So first of all, we have the combination of agriculture, aquaculture, and agro-processing, then manufacturing, and in third place is tourism. The 4th sector is energy, which is a key sector for the Caribbean and also to a lesser extent the African IPAs, but it was not mentioned by those in the Pacific region. And beyond the targeting countries and sectors, and to get a full picture of the targeting efforts, the survey also included a question on the events that ACP IPAs attend. And the most commonly mentioned events are multi-sectoral forums or of a regional or global nature, such as WAIPA's World Investment Conference, but also the annual investment meeting or World Expos, which are the top 3 mentioned events. Around 1/3 of events are sector-specific events, followed by bilateral events. So through the survey, we also wanted to increase our understanding of ACP IPA's alignment with the SDGs. And in this context, also asked whether or not they track investors' contributions in 15 different areas and to what extent, so on a scale from 1 to 10. And well, as studies show, as we know, FDI investments can bring a range of secondary benefits to the host country, primarily in the form of knowledge and technology transfer, which can consequently create benefits for the local labor force and the host economy in general. And when looking at the results, we found that ACP IPAs are particularly focused on tracking employment creation, with 83% of IPAs putting a great deal of effort into tracking contributions in this area. But with regards to the other 14 topics surveyed, the picture is more mixed, as can be seen on the slide. Generally, the economic indicators, such as local content, but also those on human capital development, are more tracked than those relevant for the environmental targets of the SDGs. However, surprisingly, also wage levels are not, well, appear not to be prioritized when it comes to tracking investors' contributions. Nevertheless, 72% of ACP IPAs affirm that they are mostly aligned with the national SDGs, suggesting that SDGs are important to the majority of ACP IPAs. Moving on to digitalization. So digitalization is clearly increasingly important for IPAs, as it is for investors. And there is actually evidence that ACP IPAs can do it well. So in 2021, for instance, several ACP countries were included in the list of the world's best investment information portals and single windows, which is published by UNCTAD. However, our survey underlined that ACP IPAs on average have limited digitalization capabilities. For example, only 21% of the respondents express confidence that they have the capability to successfully integrate digital tools into their operations. The survey also found that despite the fact that 89% of institutions have given thought to adopting a digitalization strategy, only 1/5 of all participating IPAs have put one into action. Another topic that the survey covered was quality management, so a straightforward way for an IPA to demonstrate its commitment to providing high standards of service to investors is through ISO 9001 certification. However, the survey unearthed that currently only 15% of the surveyed ACP institutions are ISO 9001 certified. Last but not least, ACP IPAs were asked to assess how important it was to them to receive technical assistance, capacity building, and advisory support in 10 key areas of their work. And the overwhelming message that was received through the survey is that in all areas surveyed, which are outlined in the report in more detail, ACP IPAs would appreciate significant level of support. And overall, they see investment promotion, investment packaging, and FDI impact monitoring as their most pressing needs for technical support. Yes, so let me conclude by summarizing the main findings of the survey. So first of all, we found that ACP IPAs show signs of mandate overload, as was described earlier. They allocate a relatively small part of their budget to business generating activities. There is no clear logical strategy aligning FDI sector targets, investment promotion events attended, and top target countries. ACP IPA's digitalization is in its infancy, and in relevant areas, certification is lacking. There is a need to further integrate the SDGs into the work of ACP IPAs, especially in terms of tracking investors' contributions. And last but not least, capacity and technical capability gaps are large, and more assistance is needed. Yeah, so that concludes the main findings. And yeah, should there be any questions, feel free to ask them in the chat or during the Q&A at the end of the webinar. And I will now hand over back to you, Andreas, to hear from our next speakers.
Thank you very much, Annika, for this insightful presentation. And I would like to now invite Ms. Carolina Arriagada-Peters for her insights on the framework to understand FDI in ACP countries. Carolina is Senior Investment Researcher at UNIDO, as well as Managing Director of Citizen Collaboration. Carolina, please, the floor is yours.
Fantastic. So pleased to be here, and thank you so much for inviting me to this webinar and also to participate in this project. So we had these findings, and then we thought, how can we take these new insights, how can we take them forward, and how can we provide further tools in order to drive investment in ACP countries? So we developed a framework, and I'm very pleased to present it today. Is somebody checking how does it go with the fantastic, great, thank you. So we know from the OECD studies that there are 4 main investment functions that all IPAs respond to or develop and deploy in their different activities. These are image building, investment generation, facilitation, and advocacy. However, when we were looking at ACP countries, the situation looked different. Next slide, please. We observed that in the road to markets, different IPAs have different functions. And as you can see, there are the 4 of ACP countries. Next click, please. And there are also 2 more that were very present in ACP countries. One is FDI readiness, and the other one is ACP competitiveness in the market and market readiness. So please click. If you consider these 6 functions, you will observe the first main finding of the framework, which is essentially, please click, that ACP IPAs have a longer road to market than their peers. Instead of having to function or to focus only in 4 functions, ACP countries have to focus in 6. So they have definitely a longer road to market. Let's go to the next one, please. The second finding focuses on resources and governance. Click these. And if we look into a continuum where at one side in the top you have well-resourced and well-equipped IPAs, at the other side of the continuum you have them ill-equipped. Please click. If we consider that different IPAs, we looked at resources and governance from different IPAs, we observed that at the lower side you will find IPAs from ACP countries who do not have the legal frameworks, the budgets, the mandates, the tools, nor the skills at the same level of the IPAs of developed economies. So this is a fundamental change, and please click. We have then the second finding of the study is that essentially IPAs from ACP countries have it harder than their peers. Let's go for the third one. We looked at environment and complexity of the FDI function and the attraction so much, thank you. And looked at in the continuum, if you consider at one side stable and robust environment, and on the other side VUCA environment, VUCA standing for volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous, you will see, please click, that different IPAs again have a complete different outlook. At the lower side, at the more stable and robust angle, you will find IPAs from developed economies who have the right environments, who have the mandates, the budgets, they have the GDP per capita are higher, you have a stable economy, you have institutional collaboration, and you have essentially resilience in the environment. However, at the VUCA level, where most ICP countries find themselves, this is not the case. Click, please, which leads us to the third finding of the framework, which observes that attracting FDI to ACP countries is certainly more challenging than to other regions. Let's see how we combine these 3 activities. Click, please. At the one side of the framework, we put this continuum of resources. Click, please. Let's go to the bottom line where we will find the length to market and the road to market. And at the other side, we will find environment and complexity. And this was really interesting because when we do it visual, and let's do a click, please, we will see that there are certainly 2 distinctive profiles that emerge. And essentially, for me, it was an eureka moment, because if we look at the dark blue profile, you will see that IPAs from ACP countries in this are lower ranked in the resources and governance angle, at the same time have a longer road to market and work in a VUCA environment, which is exactly the opposite from the profile of an IPA that is well-equipped, well-resourced, has a shorter road to market, and works in a stable environment. And why is this an Eureka moment? Let's see for the next slide, please. It's simply because when we looked at the current narratives of how we look and understand the realities of ACP countries, we observe that we are very, very aware, and the text and all the reports that we write address gaps, speak of disadvantages and risks. However, these narratives essentially are limiting the way we can find new avenues to generate a change. And some of you may have read books like The Narrative Economy, and because we know now that narratives define actions and actions define economy. So there is a whole space of emerging knowledge that is coming out that is helping to understand that the way we understand and frame the realities have a certain aspect in the economic output of the countries. So let's go for the next slide. We looked at what are the alternative narratives and suggest that use approaches around resourcefulness, speak about investor readiness and value propositions, and essentially risk management, and anchor the activities that we pursue in these three pillars so that we can essentially look at new perspective. Let's go for the next slide. We thought, okay, with this positive outlook, we want to advance further growth. And we said, okay, what are the pillars for those growth? And we came up with three. Let's look at them in the next slide. Which these pillars essentially are designed to provide guidelines for implementations. We have all the findings. We now have a new lens to look at that. But okay, how do we move to the next step and implement? And so our suggestion was to think, let's look at the digitalization pillar and advance a digitalization first model, where every time we are working in ACP countries, when we are looking at FDI, when we are deciding how to allocate resources, when we are deciding how to advance or engage with clients, let's ask us the question, what should be done digitally? Let's go for the second pillar. It's essentially partnership-led. That everything we do is partnership-led. We know from COVID is that societies that are able to collaborate stronger, to pool resources and essentially bring intelligence from different aspects of different areas and angles from society were more resilient during challenging times. So let's bring that down to our daily work in IPAs and ask ourselves, what partnership could amplify outreach in this particular project? Which leads us to the third pillar of the model, which says, okay, we have a digital first approach. We are looking to work with partners, but let's go for value generation in new ways, because essentially we know that the type of value that we are creating today, it's not enough. So we need to think and push ourselves to advance and find new values and essentially be very cognizant and recognize what new value is emerging that we could mainstream. Let's go for the next one. Essentially, and with this we conclude, of course, is that these pillars offer a framework for international organizations to design technical support that could help transform the conditions, the environment, the frameworks under which ACP IPAs not only work, but strategize, plan, and facilitate FDI, which leads us to the conclusion of the next slide, which essentially considers that and look at the vulnerabilities of ACP countries and defines and calls for unique perspectives and tailored strategies for support them. Essentially, it looks for new thinking, which leads me to my last sentence and wraps up this important effort from WAIPA, from UNIDO, and from all the team, which essentially addresses that the findings, the formulation of a framework, their recommendations, and the guidelines, which take into the account the particularities and vulnerabilities and structural challenges of ACP countries, essentially this study proposes actions that are implementable for these IPAs in the short or medium term. And this really excites me because it opens a complete new opportunity for all of us. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Carolina. Thank you for your presentation and insights. After understanding the presentation, after understanding the framework to understand FDI in ACP countries, I would like to now hand over to Mr. Stefan Kratsch, who is a team lead at the Sustainability Standards and Responsible Business Unit at the Department of SDG Innovation and Economic Transformation at UNIDO, for the presentation on key recommendations and UNIDO solution for improved investment promotion and facilitation. Please, Stefan, we're looking forward to your recommendations and insights.
Thank you very much, Andreas, and also from myself, warm welcome to all our friends and partners from the IPAs in the ACP region, but also IPAs from outside the ACP region. So it's a pleasure to be part of this session. Next slide, please. As you already stated, Andreas, we are now concluding by combining the more concrete findings of the report with the larger framework that Carolina just presented, and the need for the IPAs to become more resourceful, to manage risk better, and to have more investor-ready value propositions. So this triangulation of these dimensions now leads us to a set of 5 recommendations with some sub-recommendations. And I will elaborate on them in the next couple of minutes. So the first one is really an inward-looking recommendation for the IPAs in how they could redesign and reshape themselves to become their governance model to become more effective and efficient. And here we're looking broadly at 4 main dimensions. The first one is legal status, the second one is mandate, the third one is budget, and the fourth one is quality management. Now, one recommendation we found was clearly that ACP IPAs should consider to become more business-like structures, which starts with the composition of their board that should allow private sector representation at the association level, or the Chamber of Commerce level, but also at individual corporate level. And of course, not to forget to also strengthen the perspective of the requirements of youth and their issues, especially on unemployment and their expectations vis-a-vis FDI, as well as the notion of gender-lens investment. So it may not be enough to be reporting to the Prime Minister or President, but really that private sector perspective is important. Now, we heard it already, there is a mandate overload. So a lot on the plate of IPAs, looking at FDI promotion, investment climate reform, startup support, SEZ, etc. So that corroborates Carolina's points that partnerships are necessary to be implementing on these loaded mandates, which means finding at meso level, institutional level, different partners from the public and the private sector to see where exist complementarities, and also where maybe joint CRM tools and data sharing protocols could be implemented at operational level. The third point is on budget. IPAs should review on how they use their budget, especially looking at increasing the currently 49% of budget allocation to business generating activities to come closer to the OECD average of 75% or even beyond. Yeah? And that would mean looking at more focused budget allocation on targeting, on promotion, and of course, very importantly, on aftercare support. Quality management, fourth one. Not many IPAs have ISO certification, as we learned, just 15%. So we feel that this is important to look at the efficiency and effectiveness of business processes, and to also signal to and demonstrate to investors, to the clients of an IPA, that IPAs strive for business excellence. And they are ready to embrace quality monitoring and management framework. So this demonstration effect, by having the certificate, can be a very important distinguishing feature in the race for attracting new investors. Next recommendation, please. So the next recommendation is make digitalization a priority. And I think what came out very clearly from the previous presentation is not to digitize anything and everything at the same time, but to apply a clear prioritization logic to see what are the high frequency, labor-intensive processes in an IPA where digitalization would free up human resources to focus on something else, especially the face-to-face contact with investors. And try, if the IPA embarks on digitalization strategy, to have clear milestones and monitoring checkpoints, if you so wish, to see if that journey is still going into the original direction, because it's well known that IT projects, and we even speak a bit for ourselves here, usually they take a lot longer than initially planned, and sometimes what we get at the end was not exactly what one had designed at the beginning. So it's important to have these checkpoints at regular intervals, and also keep an eye on costs, because they can easily go through the roof. ACP IPAs should engage in knowledge sharing to implement top-notch digital solutions. So we have had some very interesting IPAs like Rwanda, or other IPAs in the ACP region, also Mauritius and others, that really were able to show some good successes in how digitalization has helped them. So there is a case to be made on peer-to-peer learning. Not everything has to go through international organizations, but since this is a group of ACP IPAs, we want to have this regular exchange through platforms that exist at regional level. Data sharing protocols is another one. So if digitalization is to really work well, it's important to build sockets or segues into ERPs of partner institutions. And if that is to be done effectively, then data sharing protocols come into the picture. For example, if one MNE is engaged for TVET, that same MNE also has an established item or ID number in the database of an IPA, engaging that MNE on something else, for example, on handling grievances. Next recommendation. The third one is on increasing the effectiveness of targeting efforts. So as Annika mentioned, we found that when it comes to event attendance, which is sub-recommendation 3.2, we find that ACP IPAs are still not very discerning in terms of the type of events they attend. It doesn't necessarily follow the logic of what they had self-declared to be a priority country. If that was the case, for example, we would have seen a lot more attendance to, for example, investment fairs or roadshows in China, because those were on top of the list of many IPAs. The other one is on prioritizing sectors. Here it's important that IPAs cannot target all sectors at the same time. They need to have sectors where there is a certain domestic fabric of industries that can be engaged through subcontracting or as distributors, or even as equity partners in a potential foreign direct investment joint venture setup. An interesting finding is also mentioned in the report, a study by Harding and Yawowczyk, which indicated that sectors that are actively targeted by IPAs receive twice as much FDI than non-targeted sectors. So that makes a nice case to not focus on everything across the board, but target properly. Third one is tracking investors' SDG contributions, which was also listed amongst the key support items that IPAs want. So having firm level databases, see how specific investors are doing, not just in terms of growth performance, but also in terms of other indicators of social and environmental contributions. Next recommendation, please. The fourth recommendation is to unlock the FDI potential. And here we are looking at project finance and business generating skills. Is something that IPAs need to enhance within their skill structure. And that means can be maybe simplistically put as the ability of IPAs to build investment packages and investment pipelines, which combines a knowledge of doing financial analysis, financial simulations of a potential project with sector-specific knowledge, as well as global knowledge about how a sector or a market is trending at global level. So that is something that IPAs may really look into in terms of maybe future recruitments to bring in these expertise within their ranks, and also have maybe look at competitive salaries to be able to do so. Linkages and aftercare was already mentioned, so we want IPAs, and we think there is a case for having structured and systematic linkage support, where MNEs can request lists of suppliers or subcontractors that could assume parts of the production or parts of the semi-finished products that are then further processed by a multinational. The third one is on special economic zones. Many IPAs have SEZs within their structure as a mandate, but in some cases, SEZ authorities and IPAs are separate. So, and in those setups, it's very important that the strategies are aligned, that an IPA that wants to promote FDI generally into the economy doesn't run into a race to the bottom competition with SEZs that want to promote FDI in that SEZ and not elsewhere. Besides, of course, competition amongst more than one SEZ in one country is also an issue we have seen, and it's at the end not serving the country well. Next slide, please. Finally, of course, keep focus on Vision 2030, which goes for the IPAs, but also probably for international organizations. The halfway point on how we did on the SDGs is not so great. So only 15% of the SDGs are on track, as established by the last United Nations General Assembly. And of course, that goes for the international community as well as for the IPAs as well. So continue the efforts to advance the SDG agenda, aligning with national SDG plans, maybe linked to industrial policies of the host country. Being aware of the climate crisis and how that changes investor priorities, but also how this can generate new investment projects and new opportunities in areas of climate mitigation and also climate adaptation. And finally, look at corporate social responsibility and leverage investors' CSR initiatives to build upon these initiatives even further. Next slide, please. So we won't have the time to really go into all the UNIDO solution offers. That would take us too long, but I'll just give very few pointers here, and please feel free to contact us, and we will be happy to share more information with each other. So one that was already mentioned is a quite important application, a digital solution that we have created, which helps IPAs to develop investment opportunity pipelines, and which helps IPAs to manage potential investors and feeding potential investors with bespoke content, as well as tracking SDG contribution of existing investors. So these are the main three items that the solutions of DIPS, Digital Investment Promotion System, and the Invest in ACP are catering for. Another aspect is trainings. So here we have not listed all, but those that we find very important in this current context, which is what IPA can do to engage impact investors, to understand how the reasoning of impact investor is different to traditional FDI. Also, it has to do with dealing with private equity and understanding their objectives and their business rationales. Another training is on investment project preparation and appraisal. As we already mentioned, that is a function that IPAs want to build, as well as feasibility study of how to do a proper feasibility analysis and what are the opportunities and pitfalls in doing. A third item here is our investment and technology promotion offices. We have 9 of them in different countries. You see them here, and they can help developing countries' IPAs as extensions of the investment promotion effort. So especially for IPAs that cannot afford to have their own overseas offices. And these ITPOs can organize roadshows, generate investors' leads, also work with business diplomats, and so on and so on. Finally, some important guidelines we'd like to mention, which is more in the space of industrial parks, which you can see here, and you find all that information on our global knowledge platform on industrial parks, which offers also certified self-paced e-learning. So there's quite a lot. I think going into each of those would warrant even another session, but we still wanted to mention it briefly. Thank you.
Thank you, Stefan, for the presentation, and I would like to now build on that and go to the final presentation of today, and hand over the word to Mr. Carl Savon on the evaluating the report's recommendation in light of the WTO Investment Facilitation for Development Agreement. Professor Savant is Resident Senior Fellow at the Columbia Center on Sustainable Investment, and we're very fortunate to have him with us today. Carl, the floor is yours. We're looking forward to your presentation.
Thanks a lot, Andreas, and good day to everyone. It's a pleasure and privilege for me to participate in this webinar. Well, I guess let me begin by congratulating UNIDO and WAIPA on their report. I think it's an excellent and comprehensive analysis that should really be of great help to IPAs in ACP countries to strengthen their capacity to attract foreign direct investment in what is, after all, a highly competitive world FDI market. The report really examines a lot of important issues, including, just to mention a few, the need towards digitalization, and we have heard in the presentation how important that is, supplier development programs and supplier databases, which are closely linked to the very important issue of linkages, sustainable foreign direct investment, and in that context also the importance of corporate social responsibility. I also noticed the issue of support for the negotiations of joint ventures. It wasn't mentioned in the presentation, but it's in the report itself. And I assume this is not only the negotiation of joint ventures, but also FDI contracts in general. And let me just draw your attention in this context to the CONEX support unit, which is an independent institution to help developing countries negotiate contracts with international investors. If you want to know a little bit more about it, feel free to get in touch with me or simply Google CONEX support unit. The overarching the findings and the recommendation and all the recommendations is the need for capacity building, and related to that, the need for technical assistance. As Annika said, many IPAs have a small budget. The overwhelming message, I quote her, is that significant levels of technical assistance and capacity building is needed. I can only support that particular recommendation of the report. Now, instead of elaborating on the various issues discussed in the report, let me focus on a new and practical tool that a number of IPAs will have at their disposal. And that was, by the way, also mentioned in one of the forewords of the study, namely the WTO Investment Facilitation for Development Agreement. This agreement is of immediate relevance and importance to any investment promotion agency that seeks to attract foreign direct investment. And it also deals with a number of issues that are addressed in the UNIDO-WAIPA report. So let me say a little bit more about the Investment Facilitation for Development Agreement and why it is relevant to the work of IPAs, including the implementation of the various recommendations of the report, which we are discussing here. Well, to start out with, the agreement concentrates on technical measures that facilitate foreign direct investment flows. And it explicitly excludes sort of sensitive issues like market access, investor state dispute settlement and protection. And more specifically, the agreement focuses on 4 substantive areas. And they're, of course, all familiar to IPAs. The first one is transparency of investment measures, simply to let investors know what is the regulatory framework in particular, which involves publications of laws and regulations, single information portal, very important, and similar type of provisions. Second area is streamlining and speeding up of administrative procedures, including, very important, e-government, digitalization, and related issues. Third area is focal points, domestic regulatory coherence and cross-border cooperation, including, very important, supplier databases, supplier development programs, and linkages. And the last area is sustainable investment focused on responsible business conduct, meaning corporate social responsibility. Moreover, and this should be of special interest to ACP countries, the agreement provides for special and differential treatment of developing countries, including that they can determine the pace at which the agreement, the provisions of the agreement, can be implemented. And very importantly, it provides for technical assistance and capacity building to implement the agreement. And as we said before, capacity building and technical assistance is particularly important for ACP countries. I should also add that participating in the agreement sends a strong signal to international investors that they are serious about attracting foreign direct investment and try to advance improvements of the investment regulatory regime and environment. Now, technical assistance, to say a little bit more about technical assistance, that technical assistance is aimed to strengthen the efforts of investment promotion agencies to attract foreign direct investment. And it focuses on undertaking needs assessments to first determine the technical assistance requirements to implement the agreement and strengthen capacity, and then to obtain such support for its implementation. In fact, a number of countries have already launched needs assessment. I think all of this gives participants in the investment facilitation for development agreement an advantage in the highly competitive world FDI market. And therefore, I would say that those WTO members that have not yet signed up to the agreement should consider doing so if they want to benefit from it. So let me conclude on what are the implications, practical implications of what I have said so far. Let me just mention three. The first one is for countries that seek to attract foreign direct investment, the WTO Investment Facilitation for Development Agreement is a great opportunity to get international support to strengthen their efforts to attract foreign direct investment. And in the case of the ACP countries, it should also help the implementation of a number of the recommendations contained in the UNIDO-WAIPA study. Second implication is, if you, and I'm now talking to IPA participants in this webinar, if your country is not yet a participant in the investment facilitation agreement and is a WTO member, I think you should consider signing up to the agreement if you want to benefit from it. You might want to just Google WTO investment facilitation to find out whether your country is a participant, because the WTO lists all the participants on its website. So, and if your country is not a participant yet, you would need to contact your Ministry of Commerce, as it is most likely in charge, the WTO, and encourage it to consider signing the agreement. It's in your interest to get the support associated with the agreement. And the third thing is, those countries that have signed up to the agreement should indicate to the International Trade Center or the WTO Secretariat that they are interested in needs assessments to determine the technical assistance and capacity building support they require to strengthen their capacity to attract foreign direct investment. And as I mentioned already, quite a number of countries have done so. So let me conclude by congratulating UNIDO and WAIPA again for their excellent report. And thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Carl, for your insights there. I would like to thank all presenters so far for their valuable contributions, and also for their great time management, because we are exactly where we should be in the program time-wise, which is great, despite the large number of speakers we had so far, which allows us now to have ample time also for question and answers. As we've mentioned at the very beginning, please put your questions into the chat box, and also if you could make a note to whom you would like to address this question. Alternatively, you can also raise your hands, and we can make you temporarily able to open your cam. If you ask a question in this form, please also first introduce yourself and the agency you work for, and then post your question. This will be very helpful in answering the question. So if you have any questions, then please feel free either to write it in the chat box or to raise your hand. Carl, I've seen you've raised your hand. Would you like to say something?
Yes.
Perfect.
Two things, actually. One, I want to answer to the question in the Q&A box, which is it possible to join the WTO facilitation agreement if one is not a member of WTO? The answer, I'm afraid, is no. You have to be a member of the WTO. You may be able to get a needs assessment, but you cannot join. But I also have a question, Andreas, if I may.
Sure, please.
Yeah. I was fascinated by the part of the presentation dealing with how the resources of IPAs are allocated between different functions. But I'm wondering whether you could say a little bit about the absolute amount of resources that are available to IPAs. I still remember the data from the World Bank WAIPA study, where I think it was said that lower income IPAs in lower income developing countries had an annual budget on average of 2 million, and that when it came to subnational IPAs, the budget was 1 million or even only $500,000 or so. Are these figures still relevant? Are they still true?
Well, that's a good question. Thank you, Carl. Actually, in reference to the survey we have undertaken, we are about to publish the second edition of the global survey we have undertaken with the World Bank, and we're also, I don't want to plug now another webinar, but we will have another webinar on this item in the next month. So I would assume that we can give more valuable insights on this shortly once we publish that insights. But perhaps Dushyant, if you perhaps have more insights on this, I'd like to also give you the opportunity to address that. Other than that, Carl, I think we would get back to this specific point, perhaps in the next couple of days and weeks after this webinar.
Thank you, Andreas. I was just in a vehicle. I have the report in front of me, and that gives, very exact numbers also. So if you just allow, let me turn to the section which talks about absolute numbers. I do recall that, Africa numbers were much more than, the Pacific numbers. In the meanwhile, just in case Anika is there, and if she has it in front of her, she could pick it up. But it's just taking me a quick minute to,
Sure.
reach where it is.
Maybe in the meantime, I can reply to
please.
Tandera's question in the Q&A box, namely, is it possible to join the WTO if you're a UK colony? Frankly, I don't know. My guess would be no, but you might have to check that with the WTO or the UK Commonwealth office.
We also have a question from Mr. Dalton Makepeace on digitalization of IPAs, specifically on what are the costs of implementing digital windows and any idea about the costs associated with maintaining these tools. How long do they typically take to build for ACP markets? He's working in the private sector and is not associated with an IPA. Perhaps Annika or Stefan, if you have any insights on this, if you would like to.
Yeah, Andreas, if you permit, I could just come in for the previous point. So it says, yeah, can I?
Yes, of course.
So I'm just reading it out, and the survey has all the detailing. The survey found that large majority of ACP IPAs have more than 20 full-time equivalent FTE employees, with 31% having even more than 100. And all the breakup figures and everything is given. Only 3 ACP IPAs have 10 or fewer employees. Across ACP IPAs, 73% of employees are professionals, and 27% are in clerical roles. And I do remember the gender balance is quite nice, amongst the ACP IPAs, which is a great positive point. I'll just stop here, but back to Stefan and Annika for the other question.
Of course, that doesn't give you the absolute figures in terms of the budget. So we might have to wait, as Andrea said, for the second part of the study.
Yeah, maybe to just complement to my knowledge, this was not a question we had asked in the questionnaire concerning the total budget. So that could be something that we can take up as a recommendation. Could we do a follow-up survey? We only, let's say, ask for the allocation to different functions of the unknown total budget, but we didn't ask for the total budget to be able to, for example, calculate per capita ratios and these type of things, which admittedly would have been an interesting, let's say, analytical element to be presented. But fortunately, I think there are other surveys that may look into this, notably the survey with the World Bank. Maybe on that occasion, I can try to answer the question of Mr. Makepeace. It's a difficult question to anticipate the cost of building a digital window. I think the first question has to do with our digital infrastructure. So to what extent do we have the required bandwidth, the server capacity, the application, the software licenses, etc., to run specific digital products, and to what extent this can be outsourced to cloud providers where application could be hosted, etc. But the more important question is probably would the IPA look at its own tailor-made solution to reflect, so building a solution from scratch with a software development firm to really do justice to the institutional cooperation, the specificities in reporting lines and processes of the IPAs, which is a challenging and also expensive undertaking, versus actually procuring standardized CRM tools from established service providers under licensing agreements, which in some cases are not cheap either. So it's important to really secure a budget which has a certain time horizons to be able to leverage on the license for some time. And even with licensed products, sometimes if then customization kicks in as a requirement, then things also can get expensive. So, well, one of the reasons perhaps why UNIDO has been investing significantly in building its own digital solutions is that we find a quite significant cost hurdle or barrier for IPAs to opt in on existing digital tools in the market, especially from the corporate space. So that sometimes poses a challenge for especially LDCs with budget constraints. So a long answer to a question that to say it all depends on how far you want to drive digitalization, which areas you want to digitize first, and if you build your own solutions or if you rely on market-based solutions.
Yes, Carolina, please.
Thank you. I would like to take the question that's in the chat about global offices. And that's a very interesting question that many IPAs discuss and have different opinions. However, there's evidence in terms of aftercare. Because if we consider the growth of aftercare globally and the importance of looking after investors, and that these investors will bring new expansions and essentially retain clients that we can sell easier. There is evidence that comes from North America and some parts of Europe that indicates that the leads that are identified by HQ, meaning offices abroad working in partnerships with the embassies abroad, are more likely to convert into expansions than leads identified in the host economy. So that evidence would suggest that, yes, there is a benefit in having offices abroad, but if and only they have an aftercare focus and intentionally seek to unleash new investment in the existing companies. And this also requires quite advanced skills when it comes to aftercare. It doesn't only suffice to go and visit the HQ, but you need to learn how to ask specific questions that will unleash new investment and reinvestment. So that argument contributes to the overall discussion about international offices.
Do you have some best practice cases on this? Some IPAs do it particularly well?
Yes, of course. There are the typical names we are very familiar with in aftercare, which are Ireland, Netherlands. New players are coming. We here in the Middle East, Dubai is doing an outstanding work in aftercare. India is upping their game, and we hear also from ACP countries in the Caribbean. We have Jamaica, we have Trinidad and Tobago, we have other countries that are looking, that really have specified their work in established investors and have essentially brought up best practices when it comes to unleashing new investment, working in partnership with their international offices. So the model of having very advanced aftercare skills, which is one of the recommendations of the ACP report, in tandem with international offices, is a very strong path that has proven to unleash investment.
Thank you. Carl, I see a note under the question or under the added point from Kendary Burgess on Bermuda, that you would like to answer this question. Would you like to refer to this?
You're talking about for Bermuda to join the WTO?
Yeah, she put she put Bermuda, and then there's a note that you would like to answer it. I'm not sure whether you referred to that already in the previous comments of yours.
Let me. I typed something, but I don't know whether it's visible to everybody.
Okay.
If I could imagine that Bermuda, I'm not sure whether Bermuda can become a member of the WTO. There are special arrangements, like Macau is a member, Hong Kong is a member of the WTO, although they are part of China. So it's perhaps possible whether Bermuda can become a member of the WTO, but I simply don't know that. However, it may be well possible for Bermuda to ask for a needs assessment and for technical assistance and capacity building. But at the moment, at least, it would have to go through the UK. So it may be worth an effort to just check with the Commonwealth Office and Commonwealth of Foreign and Commonwealth Office and see whether indeed Bermuda could have could benefit from a needs assessment and technical assistance and capacity building to upgrade its investment promotion efforts. But you know, the broader message is really, and this brings us back to the budget discussion. Whatever the absolute figures are for many developing countries, and especially the least developed countries, their budget, the budget of their investment promotion agencies, simply does not compare with the budgets of more advanced developing countries, let alone developed countries. They are ruefully under-resourced. And I think in that context, it is a great opportunity for countries that have signed the investment facilitation agreement to get technical assistance and capacity building. They can only benefit from it. But they will have to talk to their Ministry of Commerce to see what's happening in Geneva and whether the country has signed, and then proceed in order to ask for support.
Thank you. I think that also sort of answers the question we have from Gauteng as a regional agency of South Africa, who's also asking on similar lines, which I think is partially answered by your previous comments on Bermuda.
I could imagine, now South Africa has not signed the agreement. So they would have to work on their central government in order to get South Africa signing it. And in the context of Gauteng, it would also be very important to get this technical assistance and capacity building support, because the African Investment Protocol also contains a number of provisions that have to do with investment facilitation and investment promotion. So, you know, you would help African countries not only in connection with the WTO, with a global agreement, a multilateral agreement, but also with the African Investment Protocol.
Perfect. Well, thank you very much. Also, I don't see any further question from the audience, so I think we can, if there's no further question, we can go to the next and the last point of today's agenda. That would be the closing remarks. Maybe Stefan, I can hand over the word to you first for your closing remarks, and then I would hand over to Dushyant for his remarks on behalf of WAIPA. After that, we would close the webinar, so maybe Stefan, I'd like to invite you now for your closing remarks.
Thank you very much, Andreas. I haven't prepared any formal closing remarks, and maybe that's not necessary. I mean, my most important remark is to say thank you, thanks to the IPA, because they took the time to complete the questionnaire, and there's quite a bit of competition. They are very coveted partners in providing information about themselves, their challenges, their work, etc. So we really want to thank the IPAs that took the time to answer the questionnaire, and also for the patience, because it took us about a year or so to actually publish this report. And yeah, we are looking forward to act upon the recommendations and making our contribution as UNIDO in line with our knowledge and our expertise, but obviously also joining hands with other partners that are very have shown expertise in this area, like partners from UNCTAD, partners from ILO, ITC, the World Bank. I mean, basically many of the consultative members of WAIPA, with whom we meet regularly, not only during the World Investment Conference, but also in different constellations between the big events. So it's a partnership game. So and yeah, we look forward to working with ACP IPAs, but of course also with other non-ACP IPAs that have also challenges, I believe, maybe not as severe as they were outlined by in Carolina's model. Maybe the distance to market is slightly shorter, but there's still a perceived distance still exists. So yeah, just to indicate we're happy to take the conversation forward by any IPA that wants to learn more about findings of the report, what UNIDO offers. And yes, thank you very much. It was a pleasure.
Thank you, Stefan. Dushyant, I heard you on the way, so please just signal if you can give the closing remarks on behalf of WAIPA. Perfect.
Maybe I'll switch one. I guess if I'm audible,
Yeah, you're audible, but it's not that clear.
maybe it's a bit better.
It's still not very clear, unfortunately.
All right. So maybe I'll just stay for a minute and otherwise I'll just close it. Essentially, I wanted to say this is a very practically report. Unlike a lot of other surveys, where you actually look at the recommendation and it is very practical. We at IPA would be very happy to actually work with the IPAs along with UNIDO in any of the areas. So if there are any one-on-one discussions which the participants want to get into, as WAIPA or as WAIPA and UNIDO, we'll be very happy to pick it up and then get into a conversation to help you, implement some of the suggestions which were made. But back to you, Andreas. Sorry for this disturbance just at the airport.
No
back
problem.
to you, Andreas.
Thank you very much, Dushyant. Okay, with this we can I think conclude today's webinar. I think it's a well-deserved coffee break now for some of you, and I would like to thank all participants in joining and particularly all panelists for contributing. I think it was a very insightful webinar, and I think also to the colleagues of UNIDO for co-hosting this and for supporting us in setting this webinar up. The presentation and the recording of the webinar will be available subsequent to this webinar. I can only echo what Stefan and Dushyant said, that we are always available for if you would like to address any questions you have, also after this webinar, of course. And with that, I would like to thank you, and I would like to close this webinar accordingly. Thank you very much.